The history books record a year that the world still knows as the year without a summer. During that year, people across the globe were shocked and troubled, wondering where the summer season had gone. Farmers were bewildered and devastated because their flourishing crops were destroyed overnight. The water in rivers, springs, and lakes froze into ice during the warm months, and even during the daytime, a strange deep darkness hung over the land. Terrified people looked toward the sky, astonished by the falling temperatures. But the real cause of these bizarre and terrifying clouds was not in the sky above them. The true reason for this catastrophe was something located thousands of miles away on Earth, something that threw the entire world into chaos. There is a beautiful and lush island in Indonesia called Sumbawa. On this island stood a silent mountain known to the world as Mount Tambora. The mountain was so tall that its upper half was often hidden by clouds. Its height was approximately 4,300 meters, making it the highest point in the region at that time. For centuries, this mountain had remained completely silent, like a sleeping giant. Around it were various settlements where people lived ordinary lives. They cultivated crops, caught fish from the sea, and enjoyed prosperous lives. But they had no idea that inside this great silent mountain, a terrifying disaster was growing. A boiling ocean of magma was slowly building up, powerful enough to shake the entire Pacific Ocean. Then came April 10, 1815, the historic and horrifying day when Mount Tambora's centuries-old fury finally erupted. This was no ordinary volcanic eruption. According to experts, it was the most powerful explosion in 10,000 years of human history. The blast was so loud and terrifying that it was heard thousands of miles away. People living as far as 2,600 kilometers from Sumbawa heard the explosion. When the sound reached distant islands and countries, many believed a massive war had broken out nearby. British Army officers even ordered their cannons to be prepared, believing they were under attack by a fleet of sea pirates. The sky turned pitch black in broad daylight. Then, from the heavens, there rained nothing but fire, burning rocks, and ash. A torrent of fire and scorching gases emerged from inside the mountain. In scientific terms, this phenomenon is known as a pyroclastic flow. It rushed downhill at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour and temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. This firestorm was so powerful that it instantly reduced the entire Tambora kingdom and surrounding settlements to ashes. No one had even a second to think, flee, or save their lives. In addition, the massive explosion and collapse of the mountain generated enormous tsunamis in the ocean, which submerged many nearby regions and settlements. When the smoke finally began to clear days later, people were left speechless. The mountain's summit, which had once towered thousands of feet into the sky, had completely vanished. In its place was a gigantic depression, a massive caldera. A crater 6 kilometers wide and 1 kilometer deep. Normally, when we think about volcanoes, we assume that lava causes the greatest destruction. But in the case of Mount Tambora, lava was not the real killer. The lava remained mostly near the mountain. The true devastation was caused by the gases that rose high into the atmosphere. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, this catastrophic eruption released enormous quantities of smoke, fine ash, and millions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas into the atmosphere, reaching the upper layer known as the stratosphere. These sulfur particles and aerosols did not remain in one place. Carried by powerful air currents, they spread across the skies of the entire world, particularly throughout the northern hemisphere. The stratosphere lies about 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Turbulence there is extremely low, meaning anything that reaches that layer can remain suspended for a long time. These microscopic particles formed a thick invisible blanket in the stratosphere, preventing sunlight and solar radiation from reaching the Earth's surface. And obviously, when sunlight and heat can no longer easily reach the ground, the Earth's temperature begins to cool. This was a silent, dangerous, and invisible enemy. An enemy no one could see. Yet it gradually took control of the world's climate and forced humanity to shiver in the cold. The direct and terrifying result of this sulfur veil and blocked sunlight appeared the following year, 1816. This year is still remembered in history as the year without a summer. People who were accustomed to intense sunshine and heat during June, July, and August suddenly witnessed everything turned upside down. In England, Canada, and many northern parts of the United States, heavy snowfall occurred in July, the middle of summer. Temperatures dropped so suddenly and severely that they fell below freezing, reaching sub-zero levels even during summer. The crops that should have been growing never had a chance to survive. People sat around fireplaces in July, repeatedly asking what sin they were being punished for. Farmers were desperate. Whenever they planted seeds, untimely snowfall would bury them beneath the ice. Birds began falling dead from the sky due to cold temperatures and food. Europe faced the same conditions. Everywhere there was fog, thick mist, and an unusual cold that refused to leave. People began dying from hunger, cold, and rapidly spreading diseases. This strange and incomprehensible climate plunged humanity into a state of psychological fear. As crops failed to grow, severe food shortages emerged in the markets. And as economics has taught for centuries, when supply disappears and demand rises, prices skyrocket. Rice and flour became too expensive for ordinary people. Soon, widespread looting began. Riots erupted across cities, towns, and villages throughout Europe and America. People started raiding grain warehouses to survive. They stole food from one another. A desperate struggle for survival had begun. This climate disaster turned ordinary daily life into misery. Imagine it. A volcano that erupted thousands of miles away in Indonesia had transformed the lives of people all around the world. What was astonishing was that in 1816, while all this devastation was unfolding, nobody knew what had caused it. Today, whenever an earthquake occurs or the weather changes, we immediately receive notifications through our phones and the internet. But back then, there was no internet, no television, no telegraph, and no rapid means of communication. People in Europe and America could see with their own eyes that their climate had changed and that snow was falling in July. But they had no idea that the cause was a giant volcano that had erupted in Indonesia. Because of this lack of information, all kinds of theories began to spread. Some people called it the end of the world. Others believed the sun had permanently lost its power. Many religious individuals considered it divine punishment for humanity's sins. The lack of information made an already terrifying event even more frightening. People went to sleep wondering whether there would even be another day. At this point, you may be wondering, how can a volcano that spews lava and fire actually cool the entire planet? The science behind it is somewhat complex, but I'll explain it in the simplest terms. When Mount Tambora erupted with immense pressure, it blasted millions upon millions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas high into the upper atmosphere, reaching the stratosphere. There, the gas reacted chemically with water droplets in the air and formed sulfate aerosols. These aerosols were no ordinary particles. They acted like countless microscopic mirrors. Together, they formed an invisible blanket around the Earth. Whenever sunlight and solar radiation approached the planet, this blanket reflected much of that energy back into space before it could reach the ground. As a result, less heat reached the Earth's surface, causing global temperatures to fall. You can think of it as if the entire world's air conditioner had been switched on at full power, but the remote control had gone missing. The next question is, how did all of this eventually end? The sulfur particles and volcanic ash were never meant to remain in the stratosphere forever. Gradually, gravity began to do its work. Over time, the ash and aerosols slowly settled back to Earth. By 1817, slight improvements in the climate became noticeable. However, the devastation had been so immense that recovery naturally took time. By 1818 and 1819, sunlight had begun shining normally again across most parts of the world, and summer gradually returned. Crops started growing once more, and fields became green again. Scientists believe that by around 1820, 5 years after the eruption, global temperatures and weather patterns had largely returned to normal. Although more than 200 years have passed since this event, are we truly safe in the modern era? If something similar happened today, the destruction could be even worse. If volcanic ash filled the skies, The first industry to suffer would be global aviation. Volcanic ash is extremely dangerous for jet aircraft. The world witnessed this danger when British Airways Flight 009 flew through a volcanic ash cloud near Jakarta. As a result, all 4 of the aircraft's engines failed. Following that incident, volcanic ash clouds were officially recognized as a major threat to jet engines. Imagine this. When a war in a single region can disrupt flights and affect the entire world, what would happen if flights across the globe were canceled? People would be stranded wherever they happened to be. Panic would spread. Stock markets could crash. Millions could lose their jobs at the exact moment when food supplies became scarce and prices soared. People would stop leaving their homes out of fear. And given today's environment, social media would likely become a catalyst for fake news and panic. No matter how advanced our technology becomes, humanity would still be as helpless before the immense power of nature as the people of 1816. Perhaps the most concerning fact is that Mount Tambora is not a dead volcano. It remains an active stratovolcano. According to official data from the Global Volcanism Program, its most recent recorded eruption activity occurred in 1967. Additionally, increased seismic activity was detected beneath the volcano in March 2026. This means the mountain is not truly dead. It is merely resting. Deep underground, it continues gathering strength. No one knows when the pressure inside its rocks and the boiling magma beneath them might once again exceed their limits and find a path to the surface. If that happens, perhaps we or future generations may once again face another year without a summer, or perhaps something even worse. Because no matter how many plans humanity makes, nature always decides its own timing, its own course, and its own path of destruction. And against it, no one has complete control. Thank you for exploring with us. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Cryphos Studios, leave your thoughts below, and share this story with someone who refuses to stop asking questions.